Hey everyone, Alvanis here. Today I've got a bit of a different video than what you're used to from me. I recently got invited to do a lore interview with some of the developers at ArenaNet. It was basically a roundtable with a group of creators and fansite staff asking questions one after another. Of course, the developers did not tell us every single detail and spoiler about the story. We'll have to experience it ourselves when End of Dragons releases in February, but we did get some new information. There's some stuff about ArenaNet's narrative process, but there's also new info about my Trin, the Aetherblades, the Empress, the Jade Brotherhood, and the Dredge. As lots of you know, I am really into the lore of Guild Wars 2. I recently did an introduction to Guild Wars 2 lore video, and on my Twitch stream we spent way too many hours doing lore speculation. So it was a really cool experience to talk to some of the people who actually work on the story of Guild Wars. Thanks for having me, ArenaNet. In this video, I'm going to briefly summarize the things which I found the most interesting in this interview. I'm going to give you all the juicy lore details and also give you some of my thoughts. If you're interested, you can also check out the full interview. The link to that is in the description below. Like I mentioned, the interview consisted of a group of creators and fansite staff asking questions to ArenaNet developers. The developers were Quan Purng and Connor Fallon, the project narrative leads and story design leads on End of Dragons respectively. This was pretty cool because they could answer questions from both the writing and game design perspective. The questions were asked by RPG Alex, Darks from Guild News, Historian Attis, Rika from Le Bus Magique, Xandri, and myself. I'll be covering stuff from the entire interview, so a shout out to all of them. They had some awesome questions. Let's start with one of my favorite parts of the interview. In response to a question asked by RPG Alex, the developers talked about how important it is to nail down a core tone or core theme. And then they also revealed what the tone of End of Dragons is in one verse.
I've seen this word show up emergently within fan discussions, but I think that means we hopefully did a good job. But our kind of one word tonality was Jade Punk actually. We knew we wanted to bring a little bit of futurism without leaving the Guild Wars fabric completely, obviously, and staying within the world, but still do something kind of new and interesting and unexpected.
I love this bit of information. The community has been wildly speculating about all the Jade technology that we've seen in the trailers and live streams. It's very cool to see that Jade Punk is actually sort of the core theme of this expansion. Does that mean that maybe, just maybe, the community's predictions about a Jade Punk Hyneg city with neon signs everywhere could actually be close to the truth? Back in Guild Wars 1, the Jade Brotherhood was one of the two large gangs that roamed the streets of Kaineng. Recently, in the Echovault Wilds livestream, we saw that Echovault in Guild Wars 2 features Jade Brotherhoods as well. Rhaegar from Le Bus Magique had a question about this. Is this End of Dragons Jade Brotherhood somehow linked to the old Jade Brotherhood in Guild Wars 1?
They've largely are a new group that's taken the name.
Right. They're like, this name has history and power, we want to use it.
Speaking of Echovault, back in Guild Wars 1 we found Dredge in the Echovault Forest. The faction's manual explained how this Dredge had gotten there. The Dredge had created a giant tunnel halfway through the planet to escape from the Shiver Peaks to Echovault. Historian Attis asked if the Dredge were still around in Echovault and whether the story of the Dredge tunnel was actually true or not. The developers confirmed that the Dredge are still in Echovault, but we'll have to discover for ourselves what has happened exactly. I quote, "There is a non-zero amount of Dredge in End of Dragons." Quan also confirmed that the tunnel was a legend and is not getting canonized in Guild Wars 2. I was kinda like that story, but I guess it was a little bit wacky. A really hot topic during this interview was Captain My Trin. My Trin appeared as the leader of the Aetherblades back in Living World Season 1 and was working together with Scarlet. We captured her, but she was then freed from captivity and went to the Mist to perform a secret mission for Scarlet. After this, we did not see My Trin and her Aetherblades for years. But then she suddenly appeared in the trailer for End of Dragons. This caused there to be quite some questions about her. This is a quick summary of what we learned. The developers realized that My Trin, the Aetherblades, and the mystery of what they have been up to could tie in really nicely with End of Dragons. The developers don't always just want to be opening up new story threads. Revisiting and picking up old threads in a satisfying way is really important too.
My trin was last seen in Season 1. And Fractals, you can murder her repeatedly in Fractals if you want.
Hark! Unleash the cannons!
I think for the narrative end, we needed a nice connection between the rest of Tyria and Cantha, which, narratively is up until this point a closed off world, right? So we needed kind of a narrative mechanism to find interesting ways to open this place up.
I find this last bit really interesting too. They needed a narrative mechanism to open this place up. Does this mean that the Everblades are the reason we go to Cantha? Or are they the way we get access to Cantha in some way? I guess time will tell. The developers also talked about how the Everblades are nice for creating variety in the enemies you are facing. They don't want it to just be fighting humans all the time. And because the Everblades are multi-species, they work really well as an addition to End of Dragons. The developer said that there is a really interesting story about what the Everblades have gone through in the mist, and they will be able to piece that story together in End of Dragons. They also mentioned that most of the Everblades did go into the mist together with my trin. From all of this, it seems to me that the Everblades are going to be quite important in this expansion. Besides characters that we already know, like my trin, we of course also wanted to know about the new characters. We actually don't know much about these new characters yet, so this seemed like the perfect opportunity to go and ask. I asked the developers if there was any new character that they were particularly excited about.
Connor and I might have the same answer.
I mean, the first part of the answer is that there's a lot of characters that we're really excited about you to meet. I think in general, this expansion has a lot of really strong new characters that I think people will find memorable. And we from internal playtests, people have said that they like them, so I'm just excited about that going more widely. But yes, the big one I think is one that we share.
Both Connor and Quan, and also lots of other developers within the company, seem to be big fans of Detective Rauma. He's voiced by Noshir Dalal, who also voiced Charles in Red Dead Redemption 2.
Hey everybody, I'm Noshir Dalal. You'll be hearing me as Detective Rauma in Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons.
They talked about how Rauma is kind of a snarky and sardonic, jaded Canfan. I see what you did there. But he also has a lot of heart and seems to genuinely care. It seems like he might be quite prevalent in the EoD story, and I cannot wait to meet this character. A fun thing that was mentioned about the Canfan characters is that they are not necessarily as impressed by us, the commander. They didn't really know about all of our dragon defeating feats.
Something that's really been really fun in this expansion is that aspect. The fact that, like, when whenever we're in Corteria, and especially and even in Path of Fire, there was like, oh yes, you're the person who is amazing, right, and did all these things. And we go to Cantha, and you're like, you're some dude who did some things, like a couple things that they know about, but your legend isn't as prominent, and that results in some dynamics that are really refreshing that we haven't had in a while.
Another character that seems to be a favorite within the studio is a new Everblades character. But unfortunately, we didn't get any details on that one. But these new characters will not entirely take the spotlight for themselves. Returning characters, Marjorie, Casimir, Taimi and Gorik, will also have meaningful things to do. There will also be some interesting stuff in the expansion about how Marjorie and Casimir are growing as characters and how their relationship is evolving. Another new character that has been teased is Empress. During the reveal livestream of End of Dragons, we saw a voice actor mention that she is voicing Empress. Historian Attis asked about this character, and we got quite some interesting info. Empress is part of the same bloodline as the Canfan Empress that we have seen before, and she is actually not the first Empress that Canfa has had. Canfa society has progressed since Guild Wars 1, and the idea of an Empress in power is considered to be much more normal now. Some of the questions were not really about the lore itself, but about the development process over at ArenaNet. One of my questions was about how the narrative team makes Canfa feel familiar to existing players, but also fresh and accessible to new players. I really like the answer they gave to this. The developers talked about how their team has a wide range of experiences when it comes to the Guild Wars IP. Some developers were around for Winds of Change and Factions, and they can make sure that the story doesn't contradict itself. But some developers are also newer and have fresh perspectives. This helps to make sure that players who did not play Guild Wars 1 can also follow the story.
Because, for example, we could do something that's super tied into what happened in Guild Wars 1, and then one of our, newer people goes running through it and like, I don't understand any of this, right? Like, why is this important? And so that's a good check for us to be like, okay, let's re-establish some of that stuff. Let's add a little bit more explanations for it.
Darks from Guild News asked how long the basic idea of End of Dragons' story has existed. Apparently, elements of the story have existed for a long time. They knew that the dragon story would come to a certain point. However, plans do also evolve over time. Besides the elements of the story that were set in stone, there have also been new ideas over the course of development. Xandri asked about how the storytelling and tone have changed over the previous expansions. The developers responded, the storytelling language will still feel familiar to what we have seen before. There will still be instances and open world sequences. The tone of this expansion might feel a bit different from Heart of Thorns and Path of Fire, because the team always likes to do something new. There will be both darker and lighter moments, and there is a sort of noir, investigating mysteries thing going on. To me, that sounds like Marjorie and Detective Rama will have quite some detectiving to do. Near the end of the interview, I also had a kind of unrelated question, which I was very curious about. As someone who is very into lore, I was curious if the narrative team ever looks at community lore speculation. What is it like to look at this from a developer's perspective? Have they ever been blown away by someone's predictions? Con said that he does read what fans are talking about. He looks at places where players congregate and also watches some of our YouTube channels. Does that mean that Kwon is watching right now? Hi Kwon! I like your cast. But at the same time, he doesn't really go looking around for ideas. Kwon says that it's important to know what the fans are thinking, but also not to be too influenced by it. Connor also talked about how he really enjoys looking at players' reflections on the past, how players responded to things.
But there is also some fun in, like, especially once we know where we're, once we have locked down some of the details of when some of that speculation starts hitting and being like, oh yeah, they're pretty close, or wow, they're way off the mark. And both of those are fun in different ways. It's not like the thought of ha ha ha, they're wrong, or ha, wow, they're right. It's like often it's like, this is just interesting things that people are imagining based on the pieces that they currently have in front of them. And I have access to a different set of pieces, right, that I know of. Yeah, so it is really neat to get that perspective of where do people's imaginations take them when faced with, the same set of information.
As Connor mentioned, like, we do read the predictions and kind of react to them. There are some that were like, this is weirdly on the mark in an unexpected way, and like we will like share it in our team chat.
My new goal in life is to do a prediction so accurate that it will end up in the writer's team chat. One day. And now it is time for my favorite part of the interview.
Done the process of storytelling. Oh, sorry, my cat decided to join.
Aww.
Done the process of storytelling.
This is why we turned video on.
And that brings us to the end of this video. Thanks so much to Kwon and Connor for answering our questions. I tried my best to summarize what I thought was the most interesting stuff, and I hope that you enjoyed it. The actual interview was almost an hour long, so if you really want to get all the deets, I recommend you give that a watch. The link to the full version is in the description. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy Guild Wars 2 lore, maybe consider stopping by my Twitch stream sometime. We do a lot of lore speculation, and we're currently also playing through all of Guild Wars 1. You can find me at twitch.tv/Serenity. And if you like cat pictures, you can also follow me on Twitter at Lara_IRL. See ya!